Today, what I wanted to really take a look at is a very simple technique that I think can have such profound impact in a positive way on your relationships. I call it true, kind, necessary. I'm not exactly sure where I first came across this idea. I know my mom had said something to me probably when I was in my teens about this idea of true, kind, necessary. It's a really old idea, comes out of, I believe, Buddhist philosophy. And it is the idea that there are three legs to a stool that make it stable. And the way that true, kind, necessary works is this. If you're having a conversation with somebody, with a friend, with a coworker, with your partner, it's clear that we want to be honest and truthful with that person. Yet, truth can come, and I talked about truth bombs at one point, and I wrote about them in my blog. Truth bombs can literally do terrible damage in relationships that we then have to work really hard in order to repair, or never is really fully repaired. So true, kind, necessary. The truth is that you're also adding kind and necessary. If you tell a truth, but you do it in an unkind way, and it wasn't even your place to say that truth, or it was unnecessary for the person, like you were doing it for your benefit, like I know so much, and so let me impart my great wisdom onto you. What ends up happening is you run the risk of blowing them out of the water, just like a truth bomb. The same applies to the other two tenets of true, kind, necessary. If I have something to say to you and I say it in a kind way, but it's not necessary, nor is it really the truth, whatever that is, in that moment, it might be my truth, but I say it in a really gentle way, I can still do damage. So it's really bringing the three of them together. And I had an experience when I was in college. I'll just share a story. There was a girlfriend that I was living with, and she was in art school with me, and she was flirting with one of the professors. He was flirting with her. And for whatever reason, this really touched a bias of mine, which was, he's married, that's wrong. I had this real judgy kind of place that I was coming from. And what happened was he had come over to our house where I lived with a bunch of people in college. And I remember just dropping a truth bomb, like, well, what does your wife think about you being here? And she was rightly offended by my behavior. And it took a while to really fix that situation because it wasn't necessary. It wasn't my place to say anything. It might have been the truth, but it wasn't necessary, and I wasn't kind about it. I was really coming from a space of judgment and righteous indignation and protection of my friend and any number of other things that you might think about. And yet I did more damage than I did good. So I think that holding this idea of true, kind, necessary in your mind as you move into difficult conversations really allows for the conversation to happen in a much more meaningful way. I've definitely used it a lot in my marriage where I have something to say to Michael and I slow myself down and I think, okay, what is the truth? And sometimes truth is relative. My perspective and his perspective are different. And so I own my side of the truth. This is my perspective of truth, not necessarily the truth, just my perspective of truth. And I try and communicate what's important and also do it in a kind and loving way, even when I'm upset. And I think if I were to add a fourth leg to this stool, because I think the fourth leg even makes it more stable, is curiosity. Just start with curiosity. What did you mean when you said that? What does that even mean to you? What is it that you would like to see us do differently? How can we solve this problem together? So curiosity can really support the true, kind, necessary and make our conversations, those difficult conversations that sometimes show up in all relationships, help us to navigate those with a little more agility and nimbleness, and do less damage, because that's the thing also. It's sort of like a stitch in time saves nine. You know, it is, if I handle a difficult conversation well, I actually build a more sense of closeness with another person. Whereas if I bomb them with the truth, and I maybe tell them the truth, but it was unnecessary, unkind, and showed little or no curiosity, I will ultimately create more problems that then I have to go back and fix and resolve and handle. And honestly, it takes a whole lot more work to do conversations badly. One other little hint that I'll share with you is I've mentioned this multiple times, I'm a redheaded Irish Leo. And so for me, one of the things that I think is super important is that I take a breath also, and I pause. And I would rather have one difficult conversation that takes me a week to do well than to have a bad conversation multiple times a day, creating more drama and damage in any relationship that I find myself. So taking a breath and using true, kind, necessary, and curiosity. It's a great way to reboot your relationship. So have a great day, you guys. Thank you for showing up, and I will see you next Wednesday. Cheers.